Hey folks, Dr. Mike Israel here for Renaissance Periodization, RP Plus, RPU, last lecture, number 8, misconceptions, and special circumstances in fat loss. Let's keep that in. Yeah. All right, so 2 slides here, but a lot to say. First one, special circumstances. First topic is when fat loss is a bad idea. Now, it's a funny topic to talk about in a fat loss lecture, but it's very pertinent because a lot of times people will get this idea that if they can't do something else that they normally do, like they're injured and they can't compete in their sport, they're like, oh, I'll do fat loss instead. The problem is injury prevents fat loss from being optimal because you can't train to keep on your muscle. Fat loss turns into muscle loss as well as fat loss, and then you get really, really bad results. So that takes care of the first one. After injury, fat loss is a bad idea for at least 2 reasons. 1, you lose a lot of muscle because you can't train properly. 2, you interfere with injury healing because a hypocaloric diet takes energy and resources away from potential healing. And this has been demonstrated a whole bunch of times. You want to eat at maintenance when you're healing to make sure that you heal as fast as you can. Super important. Another one, times of incredibly high stress. People will be like, okay, I'm moving to a new city, I'm starting a new job, and I'm, also starting my own side company, and I'm dealing with my parents who are getting a bit older. I have to go back every couple of weekends to help them move into a new condo in Florida. I think I'll do a fat loss diet. No, do not do that. You're setting yourself up for failure. Looking across your calendar, find the less stressful times at which you're not also on vacation, so you don't want to ruin any vacations, which we'll talk about in a bit. And you essentially want to find those times, and that's when it's good to diet. A good time to diet is actually like January, February, and March. There's nothing going on. Usually it's a pretty stable thing. Yeah, it's the new year, but you're already corporate, you're already everything's set at work, so on and so forth. If you're a student, yeah, it's the beginning of a new semester, but it's not the beginning of a school year, so it's not a super big shock. It's times like that. And there's maybe 100 other times you can pick for yourself that are good, but during high stress times, you can diet, not a good idea. Stress is magnified, your chances of falling off the wagon are huge, and because your stress literally exacts physiological fatigue on you, even if it's psychological stress, it's going to add up so fast that you're going to hit your maximum recoverable volumes in training way sooner. You're going to start accumulating crazy amounts of fatigue way sooner. It's all really, really bad news. In season for sport. A lot of folks will say, hey, like I'm not at my sport weight currently. Like I'm a runner. I'm at 165 pounds. Ideally, I run at 155. I'm going to diet when I start competing, and then the competition and training so hard that all I have to do is reduce my food intake a little bit, and I get down to 155. The problem is when you're fueling for competitions and recovering from competitions and normal weekly training, you want the optimal fuel, not less than the optimal fuel because you've been trying to lose fat. What does that mean? That means you shouldn't be losing weight in season. You shouldn't be losing fat in season. You should be maintaining and working on being the best athlete that you can be. What does that also mean? That means you have to lose fat before the season starts, sometimes well before. Does that mean you can't have as much of an off season as you wanted? Totally. That's what it takes to be a really good athlete. And there's no way around it. There is the way of just doing it during season. That's a good way to set yourself up. Maybe not to fail, but to have a much worse season than you could have had. Lastly, bad idea to try to lose fat during holidays and trips. Can you do it? Yes. Does it usually ruin your holidays and trips to some extent? Totally. Like if you're dieting through Thanksgiving and Christmas, maybe you got a good reason for it. You miss out on a lot of food, a lot of family fun. And you miss out on the sensation of freedom of eating what you want and relaxing. So remember, on a diet, it's not just that you're not eating the foods you want. This is difficult to relax because you're in a higher sympathetic, elevated state normally. If you try to diet through holidays and trips, the temptation to cheat is really high. The ability to have a normal schedule to stick to, the ability to choose all your favorite foods, the ability to not be tempted, is all just down the drain. And it's the worst possible setup. So what you can do is you can bowl through it and succeed. Sweet, but you could have just dieted at another time. Or you're setting yourself up for failure, but a kind of failure that makes you feel really bad about yourself because you're supposed to have been dieting, but you cheated. And then it colors your trip to Italy with these nasty memories and emotions of temptation, of faltering, of cheating, of regret, of confusion. Geez, most people who go to Italy don't go for that reason. Right? You go there to eat pasta and to see really cool stuff. Just do that. And then when you come back from Italy a week later, when everything settles down, you got a nice 8-week stretch of no travel, do a fat loss diet then. You can violate these things and be still successful. And we'll talk about how to adjust your food to travel in just a sec, but why have to make the adjustment if you have other times during which you can be doing this, right? You can challenge yourself in 50 other ways. Diet doesn't have to be one of them. Now, if you do have to make adjustments, how do you make adjustments? So first, to travel. Adjusting to travel can be done in a couple ways in a fat loss diet. One, probably the most straightforward way, is sandwich that travel, understand that you're going to not be making amazing losses, eat at maintenance during travel. It's much easier to eat at maintenance. It requires less focus, you can get way more wiggle room, and you sort of like, you're dieting, you go to China for a week, and you're dieting. And you never lost a week, like you didn't go up and you have to fight it again, you just maintained. Good idea. If you're not going to maintain, the interesting strategy here is actually to eat a little bit less than you usually do, specifically focusing on protein and greens. Why? Because a lot of times when you travel and you eat food on the go, extra fat and carbs sneak in there. That chicken you got at the Chinese restaurant, or the chicken on a stick you got in Thailand, it's got carbs coating it. It's got a sugar coating. And you could only count it as protein, but that's not really true, right? You eat out a bunch. The portion sizes are all funky anywhere you go. And what you end up doing is actually eating a little bit more food, sometimes a lot more food than you think you're tracking. So instead of trying to hit your numbers exactly, either try to hit maintenance or undercut. So what you end up doing is you go on the trip, you eat mostly protein and veggies the entire time. You eat your Quest bars to bring with you. Another good thing is to make sure to bring protein bars or buy them there. And all of a sudden, you kind of earn a little extra credit because you were dieting like this, and instead on your trip to China of you maintaining or gaining, you actually lost a little bit faster than normal. Then you come back to your regular food, you're ahead of schedule, and your regular food seems like more food because you were under-eating during the trip. But under-eating by just a little bit, never protein, just carbs and fats, at worst, you'll just, because of the calculation errors and the fact that eating out sneaks in more calories than you want, at worst, you'll probably just still hit your macros and then no love lost. And at best, so to speak, you'll actually be a little bit ahead of schedule. So that's an interesting strategy to try. Sometimes you get in a situation where you have sort of low food variety, and that can be because maybe you eat at the dormitory and you're getting really sick of food, so on and so forth. The answer there is to try to enhance your variety as much as possible, but also remember that low food variety usually means less palatability, and that might be a good thing. Like if you have to eat a turkey sandwich every day for lunch for 12 weeks, on the one hand, yeah, that sucks. On the other hand, man, you're not going to get super cravey after that sandwich because you're just sick and tired of eating it. So there's pluses and minuses there, not exactly the worst thing in the world. The last one here, as far as adjustments, is how to adjust to what we call meh macros. Like you show up and you're at a conference and you got like chicken breast smothered in sauce. You got pasta, but it's gnocchi and it's like stuffed with cheese or something, you don't know, and smothered with a sauce. And there's like croissants for carbs, but those are layered with fat. It's just basically cookies and everything sucks. Well, one is if you're traveling somewhere like this, or you're going to be in an event where macros stink, maybe a birthday party or something where there's cake and pizza, bringing your own food, or especially just your own protein bars, is a great way to do that. But if you don't have any, make sure that whatever food you have is the least tasty option that's there, so you're not sort of driven to eat. A lot of times at corporate lunches, they'll have all the tasty stuff, and then they'll have like a salad area, and you can just take a bunch of salad and put some chicken breast on it or something, and you're good to go, right? You could have eaten all the other nasty stuff and tried to fit it in your macros, but gee, remember, the fats are usually higher, the carbs are higher than what you think, and it's going to make you want more of the food, and you're going to end up overeating. So definitely be really wary on that stuff. Bring your own stuff if you can, even if it's to supplement with a protein bar. But if you do choose to eat the food, choose the least palatable, most filling of the food that they have, and eat a little bit less of it than you think you should to meet your macros, so that the adjustment there with the extra stuff they usually put, sometimes even the salad has oil in it, still gets you coasting in to a good result versus a terrible result, right? Next topic on special circumstances, what if you're not doing one fat loss phase? Or what if you are thinking about doing one fat loss phase, but you have to do a whole lot of fat loss? If you're trying to lose 50 pounds or more, or really it's even less than that or more, how do you approach that? Well, here's the deal. A lot of people have been successful with losing weight. A tiny fraction of them have been successful with keeping the weight off. One of the reasons for this is they try to lose too much weight at once, get radically hungry, and essentially lose so much weight that they set themselves up for a rebound, kind of like a roller coaster. So one way to combat this is to make yourself a rule of never losing any more than roughly 10% of your body mass per diet, and taking 2/3 to 1 time as long as your diet for maintenance after each one of those diets. Does that get you to your goal much later than you would have anticipated? Yes. What do the maintenance phases do? Well, first of all, the smaller dieting phases mean you're likely not to cheat and not to rebound after. The maintenance phases erase most of the diet fatigue you've accumulated from each diet. So as soon as you do one diet, you do a maintenance phase. When you start the next diet, you're really free and clear and psychologically and physiologically way more ready to start that diet than you are to just keep going through 10, 15, 20, 25% of your body mass. 10% at most. So basically, what does this mean? If you're 200 pounds, you go down to 180. You don't go down to 170 at the same time. You stay, let's say it takes you 3 months to do that. You stay another 2 months at least, preferably 3, especially if you know you're a rebounder, at 180 pounds or so. Stay there. Your metabolism fires back up. Your hunger falls over. You establish a whole lot of life skills, eating healthy and eating well at 180. And then after 3 months, 6 months total, you're ready to go down another one. 10% at 180 is another 18 pounds, so it's less. So maybe you go from 180 to like 165, right? Easing on the less side of weight loss of that 10% is usually better than erring on the more of like 12 or something. Get down to 165. That's now 9 total months of this process. And then for another 3 months, you stay at 165. And then somebody who just dieted like 20% off could have gotten to 165 or, even less, like 160, only in 3 months. And then you look at it and like it took you a year to get to 165, right? 3 months versus a year. Holy crap. Like this maintenance stuff better have something to it, but here's what it has to it. Because you took your time and you did it right, a year of you being so after 1 year, you're at 165 with the last 3 months having been maintenance, having gone to 165. And that whole thing with 180, maintain, 165, maintain. You're at 165 and you feel great. You have tons of energy. You're not crazy cravings. You're at a sustainable 165. And you can go down lower to 145 but to, like right around 150 by the conversion and probably maintain that. Not only are you in a really good place where you could maintain, but you're in a place where you can advance even further. A person who went straight to 160 after 3 months in an idealized world would be like, geez, boom, success. 3 months later, I'm done. And some people can really pull that off. The genetic elite, the lucky ones. Most of us can't. For most people, what happens is they get to 160 pounds and people are like, oh my God, congratulations, Donna. What kind of diet are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. You're the center of attention at the office. And you have your first cheat meal and it tastes like paradise that has been formed into food to fit into your mouth. And you snap and you cheat a couple more times. And then you gained a couple pounds cheating. So you start really ramping your calories to make up for it. And you cheat in calorie, cheat in calorie, cheat in calorie. And after 3 or 4 months, you're back up to 180, but you're not a healthy 180. You're a 180 that has just failed and failed and failed and dieted hard and failed and dieted hard. And they've actually shown that a lot of hormonal alterations for the better, like the recovery process from dieting, do not occur. Even if you weigh more and you've regained some body fat, they don't occur nearly as readily if you have these periodic near starvation diets to try to get under control. But you can't get under control because that initial 40-pound weight loss has thrown you so far out of your homeostasis, of your stable conditions, that it's really, you're just freewheeling at that point. What you should have done is cut yourself off way early, right? It's almost the Battle of Marathon analogy. Is where does the term marathon come from? There was in the Greek history, there was supposedly the Battle of Marathon, and the Greeks won, and the runner ran all the way back. It was apparently 26.2 miles to tell the king, we won the battle. He ran so fast that apparently he died as soon as he gave the good news. Like, you don't want to marathon yourself in a fat loss diet. And people say like life's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Well, hopefully it's not like the original marathon, right? So you want to make sure that after you finish a diet, you got more than enough gusto, you got more than enough oomph left over so you can easily recover, coast back at maintenance, and then start back over again when you're fresh. Just like someone who tries to do a project at work by staying up all the way through 48 hours, by the time that their work is done, first of all, their work could suck because the last 12 hours they were just typing gobbledygook. And second of all, they could crash, get sick. And then when it comes times to give their presentation at the end of the week, they're frazzled, their project sucks, they're sick, and the presentation sucks. But if you just work for 12 hours, 12 hours, 12 hours, 12 hours, you might finish the presentation later, but you got good sleep, you got good training. You finished the project later, but Friday comes to give your presentation at work. You're sharp, your presentation's edited, you're well rested, you blow it out of the water, get the big contract, so on and so forth. It's all these things have really similar dynamics in life because life is all adaptive homeostatic systems. And if you push them too hard, they rebound. If you don't push them too hard, if you're patient, and if you give them time to recover, you can stimulate, recover, stimulate, recover, stimulate, recover, and all of a sudden, you've accomplished your goals in a sustainable way, never having gone too far. Really, really, really good idea, right? And on a very related note, lastly, for this section, we have the idea that you've been on a hypocaloric diet very, very long time, right? And you're no longer losing weight on very low kilocalories, right? So you're eating a certain number of kcals, let's say it's 1,500, and you usually lose weight on 2,000. You're just not losing weight. A lot of it is because your water storage is going up because your catabolic hormones like cortisol are elevated and they tend to store water. You're still losing weight technically, but you won't see any of that weight loss until you renorm your calories and your body relaxes. But even still, your metabolism and especially your active level of thermogenesis, how much you move around, can be so degraded that you're actually losing very little weight, even though you're eating few calories. What's the recourse there? Maintenance. Starting a period where you eat more and more food, you maintain that weight, you're not losing any more, you let your body recover, a period of 2 or 3 months usually. You come back, you start cutting calories again, and all of a sudden you're losing weight. Have you lost any ground? No. Is there a way to rush the process and still get the results? If you're still asking questions like that, maybe you weren't paying attention to the other slides in this presentation and reading a lot of other RP stuff. Patience is critical. There's a way to do it right, and there's a way to do it wrong. And on that note, last section for the entire course, diet myths. We're going to go through a couple of these and just real quickly refute them with a couple of insights. Almost all these myths originate from the human desire to shortcut things. It's not a bad desire because shortcutting is another way of saying efficiency. But we have to understand when our shortcuts are proper and work and are sustainable versus when our shortcuts are not. If you look at a map and there's a trail through the woods and there's a shortcut that takes you through a nice little path, maybe you have to climb over a tree stump, that's a really great shortcut. You'd be stupid not to take that shortcut if you were in a rush. But if your shortcut takes you down a cliff where you have to jump 20 feet and through an ice river, it's not a shortcut anymore. It's just a stupid idea. So these myths here come from a good place in the human soul that looks for shortcuts, but sometimes they don't go anywhere. Here's the first myth, and this is not an inclusive list, unfortunately. An inclusive list would require me to speak forever because there's more of these. There's more fads created every minute than I can describe. But these are ones you're going to run into all the time. Eat fat to burn fat. Okay, so when people say like when you eat lots of fats in your diet, your body sort of re-engineers its physiology a little bit or retailors it to burn more fat more efficiently. And that's actually completely true. The thing is that you're eating more fat, so you're burning the fat you eat. A lot of times people say eat fat to burn fat. What it sounds like they mean, what they think they mean sometimes, is because you're drinking more olive oil and eating more avocados, your body's burning more of your body fat. That's not true. Your body is really good at burning fats now, but it just burns the avocados and olive oil you're eating, so your chance of losing weight is no greater. Fundamentally, what is it that drives weight loss? It's a calorie deficit. Right? So if you eat exclusively proteins and carbs and just a little bit of fats, you're going to burn a whole lot of fats. If you eat mostly fats, a little bit of proteins and carbs, but your calories are the same, you're going to burn a ton of fats. You're going to burn the fats you're eating and the excess fats. But the excess fat, your body fat, is going to be the same based on that calorie deficit with very few alterations. So eat fat to burn fat is just a bullshit slogan to push keto and stuff like that. Another one that you hear a lot, people will say you can mistake your thirst for your hunger. So when they'll say like, oh, people say I'm hungry, they're like, no, you might be thirsty, so drink some water. Now, if you're dehydrated, fluid can reduce hunger, but your body is incredibly good at detecting hunger, and it doesn't mistake thirst for hunger. Okay? The human drive, the animal drive of thirst and hunger are evolutionarily about as old as the development of nervous systems, period. Right? Like the simplest organisms that have nervous systems, their nervous systems like detect light the nervous systems detect when they have a low amount of food and get them to go get food, and they detect when they have a low amount of hydration and go tell them to get hydration. Okay, so it's not something you mistake for anything. It's almost as ridiculous of a statement as saying you're mistaking sex drive for something. You're like super horny and someone's like, I think you're just thirsty. You're like, oh, fucking thirsty? What are you talking about? Right? That's insane. So you're not mistaking thirst for hunger. It's a vapid nonsense statement you can just plainly ignore. Now, if you drink plenty of fluids, especially if you do fluid preloading, that can be cool, but it's not the same thing as mistaking thirst for hunger. Cutting carbs as soon as possible, myth in of itself. Where does this come from? Here's the deal. Bodybuilders usually eat diets for anabolism that are high in protein, very high in carbohydrates, and relatively low in fats for reasons that we covered in the muscle gain section. Carbs might have some special anabolic benefits more than fats. So bodybuilders a lot of times are already at their minimum fat intake anyway. And when they start eating on a fat loss diet, they have to cut calories from somewhere, so they cut carbs, right? Not to zero, but they cut them significantly. The thing is, a lot of people have a really good mixed diet and plenty of fats, plenty of proteins, plenty of carbs, but they think, I'm a fat loss person, I'm going to do a fat loss diet, and they sort of do what the bodybuilders do, and they cut carbs. But like if you're eating tons of peanut butter and tons of avocado and olive oil, and you cut your carbs, you cut a really good satiating energy source for your workouts and recovery, and you left in a bunch of fats that, to be honest, past a certain point, just don't benefit you much. So instead of cutting carbs up front, you should probably cut fats more up front. That's a much better idea. How does cutting carbs up front work? Well, it's pervaded by this sort of inherited practice from bodybuilding originally, but it has its own revitalizer in the sense that anytime you cut fats from your diet, you just lose weight slowly, and over several weeks you can detect it. Fats don't pull water from you. When you cut your carbs, your glycogen drops, and glycogen, for every roughly gram of glycogen you store about 3 grams of water. All of a sudden, you lose water weight quick. So when people cut their carbs, like if someone talks them into it and they do it, they lose 5 pounds in the first week. And they think, wow, this is the way to lose fat. But that's not the way to lose fat. It's the way to lose water weight and think it's fat. Is it also losing fat? Yes, but cutting fats would be better. It would retain more muscle. It's more sustainable in the long run. You'll have better workouts. And it burns the same amount of fat in the long term. Because cutting carbs is all hunky-dory when your first week you lose 5 pounds. But then at the end of your fat loss diet, when you reintroduce carbs, you regain that 5 pounds. And you're like, okay, well, you regain maybe 3 of it. And you're like, damn it, I thought I lost 160 to 160, but now I'm 163. But if you don't really ever cut your carbs and just cut your fats, let's say, as soon as you finish your diet, you don't gain any weight at all. There's no rebloat because you're already full of glycogen. Right? Or the bloat is much smaller. So cutting carbs is very tempting, but probably not the right way to go in most cases. Or certainly not anything magical about it. This is a myth that is very pervasive. It's so pervasive it's not really even seen as a myth because it doesn't even have a name. It doesn't have a fad diet attached to it. The myth is in quotes here. It's lose as much as I can as fast as I can. For some reason, and again, we know it's the shortcut idea, which is at its core has a lot of validity to it. For some reason, people who have been completely out of shape for years, nay, decades, okay, sometimes get it in the idea that they're going to reverse decades of being 250 pounds by cutting to 150 within a period of 6 months. They're usually ignorant of the fact that they're setting themselves up for failure and rebound. Your job as somebody who knows stuff is to talk them out of that. The idea that you should be rushing to lose fat is ridiculous. Because the process of rushing, and is there anything wrong with wanting to be lean faster? No, of course, it's awesome. But we know that rushing sets up rebounds. That's just what it does. Going too slow can set up a lack of motivation. Like if you're trying to lose like a quarter of a pound a week, somebody could just be like, you know what, this isn't working. But going too fast definitely is a recipe for disaster. So when people say, like, when I was a personal trainer, people would come in our personal training gym and say, listen, I need to lose 50 pounds by Thanksgiving. By the way, this was September 1st. No, you fucking don't, is the real short answer. First of all, you don't need to lose 50 pounds. You want to lose 50 pounds. And even if it's for a medical reason, it's good that you are going to lose 50 pounds. But the medically correct way to put it is you should be losing plenty of weight. The more the better, up to a certain point, maybe that's 50 pounds. So instead of losing 50 pounds, quote unquote losing, trying to lose 50 pounds, failing, and then getting into Thanksgiving and a rebound, the worst time to have a diet rebound is all the tastiest foods in the world are with you and everyone encourages you to eat as much of them as possible. Why don't you lose 15 pounds end the diet a week before Thanksgiving, get your bit of your mojo back, have a great Thanksgiving, enjoy family and friends. You won't regain much weight because your metabolism and eating habits are already stable. Maintain that weight through the winter holidays, and then January 5th or something like that, start another fat loss diet of another 15 pounds. You do that a couple more times a year with maintenance phases spaced out, just like we described. All of a sudden, by the end next Thanksgiving, by the beginning of next Thanksgiving, you have lost 50 pounds. But again, like per our earlier conversation on maintenance phases, you haven't lost 50 pounds and you're just ripe for rebound. Because remember, a ton of people have lost 50 pounds. Almost all of them have gained it back. But if you do it slowly, if you do it with maintenance phases, if you do it as part of a learning experience to learn how to eat healthy and sustainably, you're going to lose the same 50 pounds. It's going to take you way more time, but you're going to keep it off. I used to tell this to students in my class for health and behavior. If you are 65 years old and you're 300 pounds, you're 150 pounds overweight, you're sitting in your doctor's office and he's like, hey, listen, you're in real bad shape. Like, have you ever tried to lose weight before? How impressive is it? How much is it worth to tell him, yeah, you know, like when I was 30, 33, 35, 38, so on and so forth, every couple of years, I lost 150 pounds and then I gained it back. What effect is that beneficially on your health when you're still 300 pounds at 65? The answer is a very small effect. That's not good. It counts for almost nothing. So when you're starting out on a diet, remember that if it's not sustainable loss, it counts for almost nothing. If, however, at age 30 you took the good approach, it may have taken you 5 years, not 6 months or whatever, to lose 150 pounds. But at age 35, you still weigh 150. At age 40, you weigh 165. At age 45, you weigh 155. At age 50, you weigh 160. At age 55, you weigh 145. And so on and so forth. You're right around that area. So by the time you walk into the doctor's office at age 65, by when you're really quite in the elder years and your health is, you weigh 300 pounds, you probably won't be living much longer at 65. You don't walk into the doctor's office at 65 years old. You walk into the doctor's office at 152 pounds. He runs your blood work and he says, you're in really good health, man. I guess you work out and eat. And you're like, yep. So all of a sudden, let's go back in time to another person at your office, at your work, at your school, one of your family members that you were both 300 pounds when you were age 30. And you both endeavored to lose the 150 pounds that you optimally should lose to be healthy the rest of your life. That person, let's say, did it super fast, and you're setting off to do it slowly, the right way, like we've talked about, and you're doubting yourself. Why? Because 3 months, or let's say 6 months later, he's basically down almost to 150. People at work are congratulating him and not you. His wife is happy with him and not you. His children are smiling. He's getting interviewed by the local paper. People are asking him, what's your diet? What's your trick? And all of a sudden, you feel like maybe I'm doing the wrong thing, right? He's like the tortoise and the hare. He's like the hare that's almost past the finish line already. And you're like, oh, good God, what am I doing pacing myself? Then he's going to go on vacation with his family. He's going to come back at 160. Over the next little while, he's going to stay around 160, then 170. Then he's going to have a couple real bad months, stressful months at work. He's going to be back at 180 by the end of the year. And now you're at 180 at the end of the year. You're tied. But he has a history of really bad dieting practices, and psychologically, he's a mess. You're good to go. By the end of the second year, he's ballooned back up to 220, 240, and he's on his way another crash diet to try to fix all these problems. What are you at? You're at 160. So on and so forth. After 5 years of grinding and doing the right thing and of being patient and of not grinding too hard, you had 150 pounds and you feel like you could do it forever. And you know what? You can. And you have all the right sustainable practices. Whereas after 5 years, he's back at 150 again. Why? Because he did another 6-month mega loss of another fad diet. And he's in this place where he's just shot himself back up. And by age 38, he'll be back at 300 again. And you'll still be at 150. Really worth considering. Really worth giving that some thought. Right? So when people say, I want to lose as much weight as fast as I can, you can sort of politely tell them that they're not among the first billion people to have that idea. And that idea is wrong. Sustainability is the goal. Next myth. Keto as a special fat loss state. People want to be in ketosis. I need to be in ketosis. There's nothing magical about ketosis that helps you with fat loss. Calorie deficit helps with fat loss. Ketosis is when not enough carbs are around, your body burns fat preferentially for fuel. If you have enough carbs around, but your calorie deficit is really high, your body burns carbs and fats for fuel, so that all the carbs you eat through the day, they just refuel the ones that were burned, and you have to burn that much more fat to supply yourself with energy. So in the long term, you end up burning just as much fat. Ta-da, right? So trying to get to ketosis, unless you got some special medical reason to do it, I don't want to say it's a fool's errand, but it's really a distraction from the main goal of creating a sustainable calorie deficit for the short term. Another myth, sort of on the other side of things, people will not be dieting hard enough. They won't be losing weight over several months, and they'll say things like, maybe I'm just gaining muscle. Like usually you don't gain pounds and pounds of muscle each week to offset fat loss, right? So if you're not losing weight and it's been a couple weeks, it's probably time to make an adjustment like we talked about in one of the lectures before. It's probably not because you're gaining muscle at this incredibly rapid pace. Can you gain muscle slowly and offset some fat loss? Yeah, totally. And at that point, you don't have to guess because you'll see it on your body, right? You can see when you lose 15 pounds. You'll see when you gain 15 pounds of muscle, and it usually won't be something that occurs, overnight or over even 3 months. So a lot of times when people say like, oh, I'm not losing a lot of weight, you'll say, hey, how's your diet, Debbie? And she'll say, I'm not losing a whole lot of weight, but I started weight training. Maybe it's because I'm getting so muscular. Like, yeah, Debbie, you're getting more muscular, but not that much more muscular. So maybe you can eat a little bit less food or change your diet in some other way, maybe expend more energy. And yeah, you'll still gain some muscle, but this way you'll also be in a position where you lose much fat much faster, and you'll be sort of best of all worlds, right? Lastly, very much tying into the rant I just gave on losing much weight as fast as you can, people who want to lose as much weight as fast as they can a lot of times succumb to fad diets. And I'm not targeting any fad diets here. I'm targeting fad diets in principle. The thing about fad diets, little shakes and wraps and don't eat this, eat that, eat as much of this as you want, but never eat that. These diets are almost all by definition not sustainable. That is, you finish the diet having lost all the weight potentially, because most of them are a calorie deficit, but you don't have any tools by which to live your normal life because you haven't used any tools, you've used fads. For example, if you cut out every single bit of carbohydrate from your diet, you lose a bunch of weight because it's difficult to eat that much protein and fat. What do you do at the end of the 3-month period? Well, you eat carbs again. But you don't know how to eat carbs. You don't know the carb qualities. Nobody taught you how to eat veggies, whole grains, and fruits. You could have been losing weight just doing that and creating a calorie deficit. Then when you bump your calories back up, you have all these awesome tools. You know how to make meals. You know how to eat healthy. You know how to time your meals. You know how to work out. All these great stuff because you followed a scientific, normal approach to dieting that was not a fad. It just built really good habits and did a calorie deficit, and then you return back to maintenance. But if you dieted in a fad diet, let's say you cut out all your carbs, what do you do when your carbs come back in? You start eating potato chips again, bread, pasta, rice. They're so delicious because you haven't had carbs in a while. You eat way too much of them, you gain weight. You rebound back up to your early weight or close, and then what do? Now you're like, oh man, I need another fad diet. And you try to do teas or shakes or wraps. So you replace all your food with shakes for a couple of months. Of course, you get sick of shakes. You lose the weight though, then what? What are you going to do? You're going to drink shakes the rest of your life? No, you haven't built any sustainable habits. You're going to go back to the shitty diet you had before, which was the one that made you fat in the first place. And then you're going to go back to being fat. And then you're going to feel like, okay, what's the next thing? I heard keto was good. Fasting. Can I do intermittent fasting? You're going to fast the rest of your life? If the answer to that is yes, some people really like the approach of intermittent fasting, great, go to it. Then it's not a fad. Then it's part of a sustainable lifestyle. But unless the core features of your diet, which are, by the way, eating properly, proper healthy meals with plenty of protein, veggies, fruits, so on and so forth, unless that is the core of your diet and you're just altering calories, you should not be dieting in any other way, right? Because any other way of dieting, especially the more fatty it is, F-A-D-D-Y, like the more like a fad it is, the more the diet takes you away from normal behaviors, normal foods, the more difficult the transition will be for maintenance. And if I've communicated nothing at all in this entire lecture, I would just want to communicate this. Fat loss is nothing without the ability to maintain it. Because anyone and everyone, and almost everyone, has a lot of weight at one time, and they almost always gain it back. Focus on sustainability. Focus on the ability to maintain after. Focus on the long view. You're going to have a ton of success. Folks you help are going to have a ton of success. And eventually we can be a perfect society of super lean people with happiness and friends, something I would know nothing about. And on that note, bid you farewell. Thanks for tuning in this whole time. See you next time for another whole course on RPU.